All right, hey, what's up, y'all? Let me make sure. Okay, what is up? Um, it is Wednesday, so welcome. It's whatever Wednesday. Today we're talking about World War II, and also one, and maybe three. You know how it is right now. The U.S. government has jumped into an Israeli-initiated war against the Islamic Republic of Iran, which is very alarming and quite likely to set off World War III. We'll talk more about it soon, but first I want you to check this out, okay? This is a game being produced in China about the Second World War. Or more specifically, the Second Sino-Japanese War, which began earlier. Just watch. I think this is cool. I have not seen this setting depicted very often in World War II games. I'll turn this down. Like this looks awesome. This looks like kind of like Call of Duty Black Ops. Overall, the thing feels like Call of Duty World at War, which was one of the best World War II games ever made. This part especially, this reminds me of that awesome sequence at the end of World at War where you're like raising the red flag over Berlin. Disclaimer, I'm not like a China stan. I'm not showing you this because I think we should all support the Chinese government. I'm showing you this because, obviously we support China against fascist Japan in history, right? This looks awesome. I think that, in the West, it's like we know the Nazis are so bad. Imperial Japan kind of gets a pass, and it shouldn't, because they were very brutal as well. There were even cases where Nazi officers who came to see what was going on in Imperial Japan were shocked and disgusted with the war crimes they were committing, even as they were committing, the Nazis were committing the Holocaust. So, it's pretty crazy how bad things got. I wish I could understand him right now. Looks awesome. It is propaganda. It is pro-Chinese government propaganda. But it sure seems like a cool game. And it's interesting to see this setting kind of move on from focusing overly on Europe, which is like a problem. Well, we'll talk about Battlefield when we play it. But anyway, that's 14 Years of Flame, or whatever.
14年燎原之火.
Yeah. Seems like a cool game. I'll check it out. But right now, we're playing some Battlefield. That's right, some Battlefield 5. And this game suffers from the problem of, oh gosh, there's an update. Well, that too. We can play another World War II game. I haven't played this at all yet. And this will be pretty cool. This is a game where you play as the French Resistance. So I was hoping to play some Battlefield, but I guess this will work. Nope. Nope. It's doing a whole install thing too. Jeez. I should have... Sorry guys, I should have set this up for you. Brrr. So I just wanted to play campaign anyway. Oh, here we go. Tannenberg. Perfect place to start. So yeah, I was saying the big problem with Battlefield 5 is it has no Eastern Front. For whatever reason, arguably the most significant front of the war is ignored in Battlefield 5. And it updates all the time for no reason, so we're just going to play this indie game instead. This is part of the World War I series, Tannenberg. And for me, it works a little better than Isonzo. They have like one game per front, which is an interesting way to do it. Kind of feels like a cash grab, but it does give you a full-fledged game for each front. The next one coming up is Gallipoli, which is when the British and Anzac, which means Australia, New Zealand, and Canada, those forces were trying to invade the Ottoman Empire through the Straits of the Dardanelles in between Greece and Turkey. I'd be really embarrassed if none of these games work quickly. Wow, should have tested these. But yeah, it's really crazy that Battlefield 5 decided to not include the Soviets who lost, you know, more soldiers than anybody fighting the Nazis. But this is not about that. Okay, let's cast our minds back to a war that is a much better analog for what's happening now, and that's World War I. World War I was a contest of empires. It was the end of it was the beginning, maybe, of the end of the great European colonial empires, the British Empire, the French Empire, the German Empire, the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Of course, the British, you know, did well in this war, and they survived to be a big deal in the second. Zero players on right now. That's sad. Okay, but we can just... This game has bots, thankfully. How do we... Custom. Here we go. We can play in Ukraine. That's interesting. Okay, let's do that. I have to just... Come on. See, what is this? Alright, here we go. Now let's play. The Russians were part of the Allies in the First World War, as well as the Second. But back then it was the Russian Empire. The Russian Revolution broke out during World War I, actually as a result of World War I. And another related result of World War I was a split in the Socialist International between nationalists and internationalists. It's kind of ironic because the whole point of the Socialist International was to pretty much unite workers across all these countries and create a working class revolution across all countries. But when World War I broke out, it kind of changed things because suddenly it just becomes a lot more real. The question of what the hell? I'm flying now? Okay. They're bots, right? I hope so. I better not be the only one in this match or I did something wrong. I think I might have done something wrong. Jeez. Alright. Still very much a work in progress. Honestly, guys, I needed to do more testing and just like keep playing the same game every week for a while till the sound and everything is good. But leading up to World War I, of course, you had see the bot difficulty, like it does say filled with bots. Maybe I just didn't wait long enough. But leading up to World War I, you had a situation where all of the European empires had basically started to claim almost every corner of the world. There was, in China, it was a little bit more complex because nobody could dominate all of China and they didn't really want to. They had port cities like Shanghai where an international coalition basically controlled it. And that would become obviously very relevant in the Second World War, but for now that stays intact. There's relatively little going on in the Pacific in the First World War, but Japan does take the side of the Allies and start snatching up German islands at the end when they realize that Germany's definitely going to lose. That was not clear at all at the beginning of the war. People were saying, the German Empire was like one of the strongest countries in the world, so people were not expecting it to collapse completely like it did. But that took several years. That took 4 years. And they weren't actually the ones to start the war. They were, Austria-Hungary started the war when they invaded Serbia. And their reason for doing that was the assassination of the Archduke Franz Ferdinand. The Archduke Franz Ferdinand was I think I got my sensitivity too high, you can probably tell. He was visiting Serbia, which was then part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and the Serbs wanted independence. So it was a Serb nationalist named Gavrilo Princip who assassinated him and he was a member of a group called the Black Hand that intended to free Serbia from Austrian and Hungarian control. Okay. He's getting shot. Let's be careful. I can't see nothing. Let's put on a gas mask. Oh geez, oh geez. Here they are. Oh my gosh. Where is my pistol? Oh no. I survived that somehow. Oh my gosh. Do I not have my pistol anymore? What happened? Oh my gosh, they're getting me. So Germany was very much on the upswing in the time leading up to World War I. The British Empire was the strongest, you know, through the entire, not the entire, but through most of the 19th century. And I guess arguably the entire 19th century. But Germany was catching up, and they were engaged in a naval arms race. I would say that this is very similar to what's going on between the U.S. and China today. The U.S. and China are engaged in a naval arms race to prepare for an anticipated showdown over Taiwan in the South China Sea. And China is catching up. China is producing ships much faster than the United States is able to. And the United States has kind of, in typical grandiose fashion, our response is to create these super carriers that are really, you know, there comes a point when it's too big to really be very useful. And we are definitely at that point where we've made carriers that are just kind of a giant monument to our power, you know? But it only takes it only takes however many missiles it takes, and you've just sunk a huge, huge investment. I think in reality, at least in terms of design, the Chinese doctrine is making a lot more sense militarily right now, because the U.S. says, okay, what can we do, but they can't do is like blow a ton of money on something like that. But the Chinese are really not as concerned with the image. They're more concerned with winning. And it's honestly astonishing to me how much Trump, and his cronies would seem to not be concerned with winning. I mean, their moves have been so strategically crazy, and it's hard not to come to the conclusion that, I think a lot of conspiracy theorists are, of which I'm one, of course, but I think a lot of people are a little bit, they tend to overestimate the government. They tend to overestimate our rulers and assume that there is some kind of grand plan where they know exactly what they're doing and they're engineering some kind of power play. The reality is a lot of them are as lost in the sauce as anybody, possibly more than any of their supporters. It seems to make sense. This stuff is so ridiculous. They must be peddling it for people to just believe and follow them, but they don't really believe it. I'm not so sure anymore. I think Trump has possibly been convinced that he is the Messiah or something. We now have the military commanders openly talking about, the apocalypse and biblical prophecies, and this is a long-standing thing that, for that one it's closer to the Nazi regime than anything else. Where, I mean, they made people believe so much crazy stuff that they literally were not believing reality. And that ultimately sealed the fate of Hitler. Because they couldn't imagine that they could be defeated, all the way up the train. People were lying to their commanders, saying that they were doing better than they were, because if not, they would get penalized. There's an element of that phenomenon going on within the Chinese civil bureaucracy. But when it comes to just awareness of strategic reality, the American war planners today are lost in the sauce. They really don't have a good understanding, apparently, of what's going on in the Middle East and what's possible. Just like the Nazis, they believe that they are such an unbeatable superpower, so inherently superior, that they can just expect to win without really laying the groundwork for that. So we'll see. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think this could very well be the war in which America really loses its status as a superpower. Iran is currently blockading the Strait of Hormuz, and when that happens and the oil prices, have already shot up, people need to understand that, the strength of the U.S. dollar is largely not based on the U.S. real economy. It's based on financial instruments like the petrodollar. And the petrodollar relies on the Middle East continuing to trade oil in American dollars. That's a situation that we engineered, we meaning the United States, which I didn't, but they created this situation intentionally, as part of the reason, really, for overthrowing Saddam Hussein in Iraq and Gaddafi in Libya. And I think we should revise our understanding of it being about oil too. Iran doesn't have a lot of oil. The Gulf countries that it's fighting do. And they sell a lot of oil in American dollars, which is why the American dollar is so strong. And it was Saddam Hussein and Gaddafi who both tried to sell it in other currencies before they got invaded. The U.S. has oil. The U.S. produces oil. So we should really be thinking about, although it was poignant to say that the Iraq War was about oil, it's a bit more complicated. It's about control over the finances of oil. And, stuff with Venezuela. Venezuela people, including me, said it's just about oil. But the thing is, it's not as much about having oil as it is about denying oil to countries like China, Cuba, Russia. that import it from Venezuela or Iran. Before World War II, you know, before tensions escalated into Pearl Harbor, the plan for the United States to contain Japan was to deny it oil. They blockaded or embargoed oil shipments to Japan based on their wars in China and stuff. And that was part of the reason that Japan decided to attack Pearl Harbor. Here. I think the recent event that's been compared to World War I the most often is definitely the Russia-Ukraine war, because it's also resulted in these stalemates of trench warfare that were so characteristic of the First World War. And I would expect any front lines that open up in Iran to be much the same. You know, I don't think, well, okay, no, not much the same as Ukraine, because Ukraine is a wide open plain. They have to build trenches, right, to have a defensive position. But Iran has inbuilt defensive positions everywhere with their massive mountains. Alright, well, going back to World War I, you know, they, there were strong, you know, ooh, oh my gosh, having the bolt makes it like, you know, that's why this game is more historically accurate than Battlefield 1, just because you know, for understandable reasons, Battlefield 1 kind of packed in as many fancy experimental guns and like cool vehicles as possible, but real World War I soldiers wouldn't have been seeing that kind of stuff all the time. Some of that stuff in Battlefield 1 actually never saw combat in the field. But it looks cool. And that game is very fun. So, following World War I, you had the League of Nations, which was Woodrow Wilson's attempt to basically create a version of the United Nations. And man, we are destroying these guys. Oh my gosh. I'm gonna switch games after this round. But what was I saying? In World War I, it was really a high point of nationalism in Europe. Like, pretty much every country, you know, was promoting nationalism, was very, you know, had strong nationalist contingents even within the socialist movement, right? And that's what led to the Second International to split between the people who supported the socialist parties that supported their government side in the war and the ones who opposed the war in general. So Lenin was among those people. And I talked about a little bit about Lenin's book, Imperialism, the Highest Stage of Capitalism, where he makes an argument about how the nature of capitalism and the central banking institutions, it necessitates a constant expansion, which ultimately, when everyone's doing that, those expanding empires bump into each other, and, you know, and this happens. That was back in the early 1900s, and it's still happening now because we still have not managed to make that international proletarian revolution that they were talking about, which in theory would be like, you know, if we can all unite across every country, suddenly we're now the biggest side, and we don't have to take a side. We can be on our own side, right? That's the idea, at least. The problem is, once the war starts, like I said, things get a lot more real, and the question of do you support this government or not becomes a matter of life or death. So in that more intense atmosphere, a lot of the socialists who otherwise would support international revolution were really not willing to say in a political space that they opposed their country's war effort. It would have been seen as unpatriotic, right? So that's Tannenberg. I think I'm going to go back to Battlefield if I can here. Tannenberg's cool. Sadly, no players, and you have to play with the bots who I wreck, as you've seen. So yeah, probably be worth doing an episode on like millenarianism in general, and like the this very historically deep-seated agenda to create the end of the world. There have been sects all throughout time who felt like the material world was a prison and they wanted to escape by destroying it through the apocalypse. And, you know, I think it's pretty clear that those sorts of factions have taken over the army and are now prosecuting this war against Iran as a religious crusade. This has already led to mutinies among the troops. People are sabotaging aircraft carriers by stuffing clothes in the drainage pipes and other things. And, you know, that's not that different from how the Russian Revolution began. You know, a big part of it was soldiers on the front line saying, we don't want this war, and we're willing to actually fight our officers instead of the Germans over it. Now that did run into an issue once the Bolsheviks actually took power. They could they had already promised people peace, so they had to sign a peace, and they signed a peace that wasn't favorable to Russia in the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk. And some people even accused Lenin of having been a German agent, right? I think that doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but he could certainly a German asset. You could say they kind of used him, right? And that's like spring of 1918 when the German Empire then collapses in the fall of 1918. But they had already established some kind of peace on the Eastern Front. Battlefield 1 is really good. We will play it some. I made the mistake of not pre-updating these, and now I'm trying to stream while also downloading. But we'll make it. I just feel like my life is so hard right now. It's about to get harder, believe that. When World War II happened, it greatly disrupted the supply lines, especially of rubber. Things like zinc were in short supply. A lot of things, meat, supplying logistically the troops in Europe was a big effort that people had to make cuts at home to be able to open up those resources. So one way that they did that is, you've probably heard of the Victory Gardens. People were growing their own food at a local scale to kind of decrease their consumption. Another thing, interestingly, is cottage cheese. Since the government was short on meat, the government was encouraging people to replace meat with cottage cheese. Since it also contains fats and proteins and what's happening? I want my viewers to be able to enjoy a good game. What's happening, guys? Let's make it happen. Dude. This is why I don't do Battlefield more often. This is annoying. A game should just start when you click start, I think. Alright, fuck it. Oh, I'm sorry for cursing. Okay. Let's do the other World War I game, I guess. No, it was about to start. I'm too impatient. I'm making this really hard to watch. I promise, guys, it will be one game next time, and it will be one that can run on a potato. So one of my viewers is asking, am I on? I think I'm on. check right now if I'm even oh yeah, I'm live. Yeah, people can watch me. Oh, we got a new anti-cheat. That's what it is. Javelin anti-cheat. I guess Punkbuster wasn't cutting it. Well, that's really annoying to happen right now. And that is probably what German officers said when Hitler told them to invade the Soviet Union. They were like, right now? Really? Kind of busy. Come the hell on. What are you doing? Here we go. Yeah, boy, let's play some Battlefield. I hate to say it because it's like a AAA game from a big company, but this is way more fun. It has vehicles. It has players. We doing it. I wonder if I would get in trouble on YouTube for broadcasting a full, like, speech of Hitler. I don't obviously want to amplify that message. I just historically I just saw one today and it's pretty interesting and you know, I feel like they don't do a good job in school of explaining to you why the Nazis had support, you know? Once you realize what the Nazis actually believed and why people supported them, you can understand this current day Trump movement a lot better. Alright, don't put me in the empty one, please. It's also true that Israel, you know, or Zionism, I should say, rather, has complicated ties to the Nazis. Where, you know, there was a group called the Labor Zionists that the Nazis actually sanctioned as like the one Jewish group that they allowed because they advocated for the Jews leaving Germany, right? To go to Palestine, to colonize Palestine. Alright, here we go. This game is fun. Got a big old tank helping us. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. They were hiding like right in front of me. Dang. Oh man. I'm playing as the Nazis, huh? That sucks. Doesn't matter. Bread Conqueror. I was just playing as the British Empire, right? I can't constrain myself to playing only good guys because there are no good guys in history. That's not true. There are definitely some pretty good guys in history. I'm just, you know how it is. Oh jeez. Yeah, fascism today definitely looks different. Um, if people are confused about all of the many differences between Trumpism and classic Nazism, I would recommend people look into a book called Ur-Fascism by Umberto Eco, and it basically explains the what he theorizes as the universal characteristics of fascism, um, even after like it's been uh, even after it's changed its cultural form. All right, get historically accurate weapons here, and oh my gosh, I spawned and immediately got bombed. Okay. Um, Jeez. See, and look at that. They were too woke, I guess, to put in the swastika or whatever, but I guess I'm okay with that, but like it's a World War II game, you know? If there's an appropriate context ever, it would be here. Alright, let's get these guys. Alfred Hitchcock, the famous American director from the 1940s. There's a video of him. I guess it's like kind of structured like a PSA, but he says it's almost like a health PSA, you know, and he's talking about this new disease called fascism. There's only one known cure, and he holds up a bullet. Apply directly to the forehead. Head on. Apply directly to the forehead. Whoa. Whoa. I didn't know I could do that. Alright. So, you know, World War II ended with the creation of the United Nations, and, you know, I always thought it was kind of nice that, like, you know, regardless of all our other disagreements, up until recently, pretty much every country had mostly agreed on the idea that like the Nazis were bad and we created this current world order against Nazis. But since we created it also kind of for capitalism, it you know, they say that fascism is capitalism in decay, right? The US has been an empire in decline for a while. So we're at the point now where capitalism is decaying and fascism takes over to basically say, you know, we can't we're not just gonna let this downslide happen. We're gonna lash out and try to reconsolidate some, you know, some power through war, because, you know, the thing about war is it can change things dramatically. Oh my gosh. How did they survive the freaking rocket I just launched at them? Oh my gosh, there's such a sweat. Okay, I survived at least. And yeah, just like in the American Civil War, there were huge amounts of, you know, partisans who weren't affiliated with any regular military carrying out irregular actions on the ground. And whether that's the French resistance, the Polish resistance, the Chinese resistance, average people taking up arms and acting under their own initiative was a major factor in the war. And generally, most histories focus on the regular armies and what they were doing. I think it's probably true that the regulars and the irregulars, neither one could have won without the other. But I don't know. For World War II, that's complicated because, like, much like Trump today, you know, the irrational mentality of the Nazis was like suicidal in the long run, no matter how long they kept it going. Let's just focus here and try and get some kills. They must be around. Got a friend over there. Oh, I guess we have this place pretty well overrun. Oh, there he is. Oh my gosh, he must have ran out. Oh, they got him. Okay, they already got him. Does anybody want to hop in the Jeep? Whoa. What are they holding? I never saw that. Oh, I ran out of rockets. Dang, and I don't even think I hit it that time. Is it still alive? No, they got it. Nice. We're like all moving together here. That is the way to do it. Oh my gosh. Whoa. Ah! Don't shoot me. There you go. There you go. Alright, remember guys, I am a Nazi in this game. I don't like it, but that is the case. Oh my goodness. Alright, cool. Cool. That was chaotic. I just realized I didn't have any rockets, but then it blew up anyway because my allies are badass. Wow. Let's see what we can do here. I ran out of grenades too. Oh, I couldn't save my squad mate. I know he's still back there. Oh my gosh. Too focused on him, I guess. Alright. So, I mean, oil was a big part also of the reason for the Nazis to launch Operation Barbarossa at that particular time in 1941 when they invaded the Soviet Union and expanded the war. Because, you know, previously they had signed the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, which was a non-aggression pact between Germany and the Soviet Union. It's often misunderstood as an alliance, but it was very much a pragmatic thing, and in some ways similar to like the Berlin Conference of the Scramble for Africa, you know, where they were both sort of colonial powers taking over Poland and dividing it up between themselves because they didn't want to fight over it yet. And but for the Nazis, like, they were always against the Soviets. Fighting against the Soviets was always part of the plan. They even had hoped to bring Britain and France, or especially Britain, onto their side in the war, because the king at the time was a Nazi supporter. Not surprising, especially when you realize what the royalty had been doing recently with Epstein and all of that. Okay, now they got 2 tanks working together. Maybe they can push us back some. But yeah, so there were a lot of oil fields in like Ukraine and places that were held by the Soviet Union, and that's what the Nazis wanted to control because they were running out of oil fast in their wars, in their war with Poland, France, and Britain. I think the Nazis weren't really expecting it, but Britain and France joined the war against Germany when Germany invaded Poland in 1939, and that's considered the official start of World War II, even though the fighting between Japan and China had already begun back in 1937. So some people, especially those who are more focused on the Asian side of things, marked the beginning of World War II in 1937 when Japan invaded China. The important thing to know about Imperial Japan at that time is that they did not really have control of their own military. The Army and Navy sort of operated autonomously, doing whatever those commanders wanted, and they had a rivalry between each other where, many times they didn't coordinate, and the Navy would even sabotage the Army because they were competing over who was the best. But definitely the civilian government had no power to control the military. And that's different from Germany. I mean, when Hitler was elected chancellor, the Nazis became the German civilian government, so they didn't have to worry about the same kinds of problems that Japan had, where the Japanese government could sign a peace treaty and then the Navy could just decide to attack anyway. So it's kind of impossible for them to even do much diplomacy because everyone knew that they couldn't trust them because their own military forces were beyond their control. Oh, come on. I should have hit that guy, I thought. It's nice that it looks like I can stream and play online. That's very good. I was worried I wouldn't be able to do that. Oh, let's save the comrade. Yes. I got you, bro. I got you. Hell yeah, and then he saved my life. That was dramatic. Oh my gosh. I still can't resist dying by not looking. Come on, big boy. Hey, where you at? Come get me. No. Whoa, did this whole ass plane just crash right here? Whoa. Alright, I know they're up there. I know they're over there. They won't fool me this time. Dang it. Oh, I'm so trash at this game. I gotta do better. Let's do this. Let's go. This is not like my one World War II episode. Like, I'll have good episodes on that, but, you know, it's kind of hard because most people already know a bunch of stuff about World War II. And, same with the Civil War. It's kind of like very interesting, but not the same as it when I do like the Algerian War for Independence, which Americans aren't taught about. Oh my gosh, I didn't realize he was up there. I thought he was still down there. Man. But yeah, the League of Nations pretty much failed to stop World War II, which was its one purpose, because it didn't really have much power, and the US kind of dipped out, which is sort of what has happened now, alarmingly, with the UN. If you think about it, Trump has basically given a big middle finger to the UN and created this Board of Peace, which is made it up entirely of indicted war criminals, ironically. And so he's trying to replace the UN with something else, which is more, it really seems like everything Trump has said and done has indicated like a desire to return to like the World War I era stuff, that where countries can just imperialize each other like pre-World War One. But that's it's not going very peacefully. I don't think that Trump is going to achieve world peace with the Board of Peace. Oh my goodness. So the UN does suffer from some similar problems of the League of Nations, just like general toothlessness. But you can imagine the same way the UN has been announcing this and that Trump does or that Israel does. Um, the League of Nations was probably sending similar letters about the Nazis as they were invading Czechoslovakia and different places, and we all see how that turned out. Oh my goodness. See, I think one problem with this game is the guns are not balanced, and people know what guns to use. I like the one I have though. It's pretty good. I'm just bad at games. Aw, man. Okay, well, we won. That's good. I think I'll call it there. Thanks for watching. Peace to the world, and the only way is through international revolution. Bread